Thanks, guys. So today I'm going to be talking about how you can grow your wallet by simply growing your relationships. It's something we like to call at Quest private lending. So the three main points that I'll cover today are firstly how you can access private money, which happens to be the most easily accessed financing source in the industry. Secondly, private money is mutually beneficial, not just for the person that's going to be getting the money to do the deal, but also for the person that's going to be actually lending it out. And lastly, even that the worst case scenario, if you know what you're doing, can still be a good scenario in the end. So the first point is that it's the most easily accessed financing source for investors. So this isn't my story, but it's an investor that I know from class. So he came across his first deal that he wanted to do. He didn't have enough money. So he kind of broke it down and determined that he had two main options for his financing sources. He could go to a bank or a hard money lender. So the next day he went down to the local bank, we'll just say it was Chase, and while he was there, he asked them for a loan. The banker told him, sure, we can give you a loan, but we're just gonna need some things first. So he needed his employment history, he needed his credit score, he needed to know how much he had in the bank, what he was making right now, and he also told him that, you're gonna have to put a certain amount down, and we're not gonna be able to give you all the money you need. So in other words, if you need to do some fix-ups, we can't lend you that, and it's gonna take us several weeks to get it to you. So the investor left saying, this is just not a viable option for me. So he went down to a hard money lender that he had met at one of the events in the industry, and when he got there, they too said, sure, we can give you the money for the investment, but we're gonna charge you 2 to 3 points up front and 15% interest. So as a new investor, that clearly wasn't a viable option for him either. So he went to the local bar to grab a few beers and wallow in his misery, and while he was there, the guy a couple bar stools down kind of leaned over and said, hey, you look like you've had a rough day. So they got to talking a little bit, and it turns out this guy was actually a longtime Quest client, and this guy now had his first experience with private lending. So instead of abiding by an institution's guidelines or having to release financial information or wait a certain time frame, just by building a relationship with this guy, he was able to do this investment he wanted to. Recently, Katie and I went on the Financial Friends Network cruise. And just by the name, you can kind of tell where this is going, right? So on the cruise, basically, it's a normal cruise line, but we have rented out the conference rooms on there, and like 200 to 250 people go like 2 to 3 times a year now. And so it really is this financial friends network. While we were there, we kind of got to talking to a brand new guy, because surprisingly, 50% of the people that went on the cruise this time were brand new, which was kind of different than previous times. But we got talking to this guy, and he told us that he said that, when he kind of got there, he was a little bit intimidated. I mean, there's some big names there, there's like John Heyer and Quincy and David Phelps and really big name kind of guys in the industry. But he kind of likened it to being like in a cocoon, and then all of a sudden he was like that butterfly coming out. So he felt that like by the end of the cruise, he was able to kind of get out of his shell, spread his wings, and actually develop these relationships. So definitely it's easily accessible if you know where to go and how to talk to people about it. The second point is that it's mutually beneficial, not just for the person that's going to be borrowing it, but also for the person that's lending, which in this case was me. I had been looking for my first deal for a while, and I know that me and Ingrid and a couple other people in the department had really been trying to get Nathan and Quincy to help us. So they've come to us with a few deals, but we always kind of chickened out at the end, because as a young person, you don't have a lot of money, and the idea of possibly risking that is kind of scary. So this year, he finally convinced us that we needed to do it, and we did, and it ended up working out. We actually, I think just today, received our final payment for the deal. I just got the email to my phone, but yeah, basically what happened is that the investor, Hector, that we did the investment with, just like in the first story, he was able to easily get these funds, but for people like me and Ingrid that we work a lot of hours, we're traveling a lot, being an active real estate investor, it's just not realistic for us right now. So being able to get what we like to call that mailbox money was something that was really attractive to us. So if you remember when you're in school, they always talked in science class about like a symbiotic relationship, so kind of like a bee and a flower. So the flower needs to be pollinated, and the bee needs the nectar to make the honey. It's the same thing with private lending. If you're doing it right, it's a give and take. You're both getting something beneficial from it. Last but not least, if you're doing it right, if you know what you're doing, the worst case scenario can even be the best. So 2 stories on this. The first one actually relates to private lending. The second one's a little bit more about me. So, going back to the first story, let's say this guy stopped making his payments, right? Stopped answering his phone calls, stopped paying on time. Most people would look at that and say, well, the guy that lent him the money in the bar, he lost out, The deal was a wash and he's lost all his money that he's lent this guy. But if you know anything about private lending, usually you're not going to just lend them the funds and just say, good luck. You're going to secure it by the actual asset, and that's what he did. So in the end, if that investor stopped paying, he was able to then foreclose and take ownership of that property, and then he could sell it or put in renters or whatever investment strategy made sense. So as you can see, if you know what you're doing, the worst case scenario can be the best. It reminds me a little bit about how actually I came to Quest. So when I was at St. Ed's, it was the summer before my senior year, and in order to graduate, we needed to have an internship. So at the time, I kind of thought I was going to go on and maybe go to law school. So I was applying kind of all over the place because I really just wanted to make sure that I could find something. But there was one particular internship that I really wanted. It was at a law firm downtown. So I applied, got an interview, was super excited, and when I got there, I got the job. But I remember the head guy in the law firm interviewing me, and he said, well, it's unpaid. We're going to give you it was nothing. They were we're going to give you $100 stipend a month to pay for your parking. At the time, I was going to be driving from Sugar Land, where my parents live. I was going to have to buy clothes to go work at a law firm. So $100 a month was definitely not going to work for me. So I ended up telling him, I sadly I can't take the internship, and was really disappointed or whatever. But about maybe 3 weeks or so later, I found the Quest internship posting online. So sent an email, did a phone interview, drove in from Austin, did the interview in person with Nate and Nathan, and they hired me on the spot, and I've been here ever since. So even though it was this worst case scenario for me, that I really wanted to do this job, I really wanted to go to law school, in the end it actually worked out, and it was the best case scenario. So just remember that with a lot of things, especially private lending, just building your relationships is really going to benefit your life. It's the most easily accessed financing source. It's mutually beneficial to both parties. And lastly, even the worst case can sometimes be the best.
Great, all right.